Hello BookTube, welcome to the Literary Buffet. My name is Louis and today is Thursday, so we'll do a Poetry Thursday. And I thought today I will read you a poem by Fernando Pessoa, the towering figure of Portuguese poetry in the 20th century. Not just poetry, he also wrote the Book of Disquiet, who has become quite popular. But originally in Portugal, he was most famous for his poetry. He only published this one book while he was alive. This was published in 1934 and it's called Mensagem, or Message. It's a poetry collection. But most of his poems were collected after his death, and as I mentioned in another video, and I think it's quite well known, Pessoa had this concept of heteronyms, which is a bit more than pseudonyms. He would actually write in as with different masks, basically. So imagining himself to be a different person with a completely different background. He would imagine whole backstories to his poets. So some were from the countryside and had just very rudimentary literacy, but would write very basic but kind of like pastoral poems. And then others were highly educated, highly sophisticated, kind of like sons of merchants or something from Porto or from Lisbon, and they would write poems in the classical style, like odes, as the Romans would. This one here, this collection that he published while he was alive, is actually the only one that is published in his own name. So these are poems that he signed as Fernando Pessoa. This collection is actually a collection of poems that allude to Portuguese history and that are, almost like nowadays would almost say nationalistic. But some of them are still quite well known. Others are a bit obscure, to be honest. I haven't read all of them, but I will read you one of them that I really like. It's actually also quite famous. You come across it in Portugal, in all kinds of places. And it's called Mar Português, or Portuguese Sea. I'll read it to you first in Portuguese. It's very short, so no worries. And then I'll read you a translation into English. I'll read you my own translation because the translations I found online were so. I didn't really like them. I'm not saying mine is better, but yeah, I'll just read you mine. You can find other ones if you didn't like that one. But first, very briefly, the Portuguese version. So, Mar Português. Ó mar salgado, quanto do teu sal são lágrimas de Portugal. Por te cruzarmos, quantas mães choraram, quantos filhos em vão rezaram, quantas noivas ficaram por casar, para que fosses nosso, ó mar. Valeu a pena? Tudo vale a pena se a alma não é pequena. Quem quer passar além do bujador, tem que passar além da dor. Deus ao mar o perigo e o abismo deu, mas nele é que espelhou o céu. So that woke Lucky up. So, in English, that would go something like this. Portuguese Sea. So that's the title. O salty sea, how much of your salt comprises tears of Portugal? For us to cross you, how many mothers wept, how many sons in vain a prayer kept? How many brides no husband see, so that you were ours, O sea? Was it worth it? Everything is worth it, unless your soul has lack of spirit. If you want to pass Cape Bojador, go past the pain and then some more. God to the sea gave danger and abyss, but in it mirrored heaven's bliss. So, as you can see, is really in a poem. It encapsulates the whole period of the whole era of the Portuguese discoveries. If you go to Portugal, you will see everywhere these monuments that date to the time when Portugal was navigating the seas and circling the African continent, traveling to India, getting the spices, traveling on to Indonesia, then to Macau, to Japan. And the one poem that, or the one work of art that has basically encapsulated that before Fernando Pessoa was this one here, Os Lusíadas by Luís de Camões, the national poet of Portugal. He has the same kind of importance for the Portuguese language as Shakespeare has for the English language. This is an epic poem about the time of the discoveries, basically following Vasco da Gama as he arrives first in Africa and then in India, and retelling with backstories the whole epic history of Portugal until the time of the discoveries. The moment that Camões published or finished the Lusíadas, as it's called, is actually the pinnacle of Portuguese power and then the Portuguese Empire, basically. And right after that, the king to whom Camões had dedicated this epic poem, Dom Sebastião, King Sebastian, he actually launched into an ill-fated conquest of Morocco and died and disappeared. And after that, Portugal was conquered by Spain, and the empire faded. And since then, Portugal has basically just been a history of decline, of the loss of this glory and this splendor that Portugal had. And of course, Pessoa was well aware of, Camões was well aware of this whole story. But he actually, with this collection of poems that also allude to the history of Portugal, but in a much more mystical and kind of a lyrical way, like this poem I just read, he wanted to kind of like reframe it in a different way. And this poem, Portuguese Sea, that I just read to you, it manages to actually encapsulate all of this in just like these few lines here. Tells you about the efforts and like the suffering that Portugal went through to actually conquer this glory that it had. And it asks the question, was it all worth it? And Camões says, yes, it was all worth it. You just have to have the spirit. You have to have, the guts to do it. And even if you have, all of this danger in front of you, this pain, in the end, it's worth it because, it's in all the sea of pain that God has actually mirrored the splendor of heaven. You can, of course, disagree with Pessoa's take on the sea of dangers and pain and going over pain to overcome the pain and the dangers and the suffering to become stronger. But Pessoa actually saw it beyond like just this personal suffering. I think what he was after in the end was not necessarily this idea of Portugal needs to be strong again and needs to reconquer the empire. So even though he was like an adept of what is called Sebastianism, so after the king I just mentioned, there was kind of like this political movement where some people wanted to have, or that they were yearning for this legendary figure of King Sebastian that would come back, appear in the fog and bring Portugal back to glory. So he was kind of like an adept of that movement, but in a more mystical way. It's not necessarily that he wanted Portugal to go and conquer places again and whatnot, but I think it was more about people just regaining their strength as a nation and really looking forward to a future, to building a brighter future for Portugal, for themselves. So from that perspective, I think you can see this poem also as, not necessarily as a nationalistic poem as it has been often construed. and not necessarily just as like this mythical, longing for the old times of glory, but also like as an almost like an encouragement or an exhortation to, actually go the extra mile. Don't wallow in the suffering, but yeah, yearn for a better future because it's worth it in the end. So that was a little interlude in Portuguese poetry. Hope you liked it. Next time it will be something completely different. So thanks for listening, and goodbye, BookTube.